That morning in 1908, deep in the heart of Siberia, the world changed in an instant. The sun was rising over the vast empty forests near the Podkamenia Tunguska River when, without warning, the sky exploded. A blinding fireball, brighter than the sun, tore through the atmosphere. Moments later, the earth shook with a force greater than the most powerful nuclear bomb. Trees for miles flattened like matchsticks. A deafening shockwave rippled across the land, shattering windows and knocking people off their feet hundreds of miles away. And then silence. No crater. No sign of impact. Just a wasteland of scorched, flattened trees stretching across the Siberian wilderness. What could have caused such devastation? A meteor? Comet? Something else entirely? To this day, over a century later, the mystery of the Tunguska event remains unsolved. But what if the truth is far more terrifying than we ever imagined? Imagine standing in the middle of a dense, untouched forest, the kind where the only sounds are the whispers of the wind and the distant calls of birds. Now, picture that same place moments after an explosion 1,000 times stronger than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. That's exactly what happened in Tunguska. The blast flattened more than 800 square miles of forest, an area larger than the entire city of New York. But here's the strangest part. There was no impact crater. Scientists have spent decades searching for evidence of a meteorite or comet, but none has ever been found. The first expedition to the site didn't happen until 1927, nearly 20 years after the explosion. Russian scientist Leonid Kulik led a team through the harsh Siberian wilderness, expecting to find a massive crater. But instead, what they discovered defied explanation. Trees had fallen outward in a radial pattern, as if something had exploded in mid-air. At the center of the blast zone, the trees stood eerily upright but stripped of their branches, blackened skeletons reaching toward the sky. It was as if a force beyond human comprehension had descended upon this remote land and then vanished without a trace. Locals spoke of a firestorm in the sky, a second sun that burned so brightly it turned night into day. Witnesses from villages hundreds of miles away recalled a column of fire streaking across the heavens, followed by an earth-shaking boom that sent shockwaves through their homes. In London, night skies glowed so brightly in the aftermath that people could read newspapers outdoors at midnight. But what could have caused such a massive explosion without leaving any debris behind? Theories have ranged from the scientific to the bizarre. Some experts believe a comet made of ice disintegrated in the atmosphere before hitting the ground. Others suggest a fragment of an asteroid, vaporized upon impact. But then, there are those who believe something else happened, something we aren't supposed to understand. Could it have been an extraterrestrial event? A secret experiment gone wrong? Or perhaps a force of nature so rare that we've yet to comprehend its true power? The deeper you dig into the Tunguska mystery, the more unsettling it becomes. Why were radiation levels at the site strangely high? Why did local wildlife seem to mutate in the years that followed? And why do some reports suggest strange lights and magnetic disturbances in the area even today? Some researchers claim that Tunguska wasn't just an accident. It was a warning. A cosmic event that could happen again at any moment, without warning. If a similar explosion were to occur over a populated city today, the destruction would be unimaginable. Millions could perish in seconds. But here's the chilling part. Scientists believe we might be overdue for another Tunguska-level impact. Could it happen again? And if so, where? The truth may be out there, hidden in the ashes of that remote Siberian forest. But one thing is certain. Whatever happened on that fateful morning in 1908 was no ordinary disaster. And the scariest part, we still don't know the full story. In the years that followed the Tunguska explosion, scientists, adventurers, and conspiracy theorists all searched for answers, but every discovery only deepened the mystery. The world had never seen anything like it before, and even now, over a century later, we still don't fully understand what happened that morning in 1908. But maybe, just maybe, some people do. Leonid Kulik, the Soviet scientist who led the first real investigation to the site, was convinced that the explosion had been caused by a meteorite. He believed that if he could find evidence, fragments of space rock, a hidden crater, anything. It would not only solve the mystery but also prove the importance of studying celestial threats. He gathered a team and set out on an expedition in 1927, braving the brutal Siberian wilderness. It took them weeks to reach the blast zone, traveling through dense forests, frozen rivers, and land untouched by civilization. When they finally arrived, the sight before them was something out of a nightmare. 4 miles in every direction, trees lay flattened, pointing away from a central spot like the aftermath of an explosion. The ground was scorched, yet strangely, there was no sign of a crater, no impact site where a meteorite should have struck. And in the very center of the devastation, the trees stood tall but stripped bare, their blackened trunks a haunting reminder of the event that had taken place. Kulik and his team searched tirelessly, convinced they would find evidence of the impact. They dug into the frozen earth, scoured the land for meteorite fragments, and even interviewed local Evenki tribespeople, who had their own chilling stories to tell. Many refused to go near the site, believing it to be cursed. According to their legends, a great fire god had descended from the sky, punishing the land with a force more powerful than anything humans could understand. Some spoke of strange lights, glowing orbs that danced across the sky in the days before the explosion. Others mentioned animals behaving oddly, herds of reindeer running wildly, birds disappearing from the forests. Kulik, being a man of science, dismissed these stories as superstition, but deep down, even he must have felt the weight of the mystery pressing down on him. If this was just a meteorite impact, why was there no crater? Where was the missing rock that should have left evidence scattered across the land? And why did the air still feel different? Some members of the expedition reported feeling strange sensations, dizziness, headaches, an eerie sense of being watched. Years later, more expeditions followed, each searching for an explanation, each returning with more questions than answers. Some scientists suggested that a comet, made mostly of ice, had entered the atmosphere and exploded before reaching the ground. That would explain the lack of a crater. But if that was the case, why were radiation levels in the area higher than normal? Some tests showed traces of unusual isotopes, the kind not typically found in meteorites. Others pointed to reports of magnetic disturbances, compasses spinning wildly, strange electrical surges. This led some researchers to a more unsettling theory. What if the Tunguska event wasn't caused by a natural object at all? What if it was something else? Over the years, rumors spread. Whispers of secret experiments, lost technology, even extraterrestrial involvement. Some believed that Nikola Tesla, the genius inventor known for his experiments with electricity and wireless energy, had accidentally triggered the explosion with one of his tests. Tesla had once spoken of a plan to transmit energy through the atmosphere, and some theorists suggested that a miscalculation had sent a powerful energy beam directly to Siberia. But no evidence ever surfaced to support this idea. Then, there were those who believed something far more mysterious had taken place, something not of this earth. The idea of extraterrestrial involvement wasn't as far-fetched as it might seem. Witnesses had described a glowing object streaking through the sky, followed by a blinding flash. Some accounts even mentioned a strange, low hum before the explosion. Could it have been a spacecraft, an alien probe that malfunctioned or self-destructed? In the 1960s, Soviet scientists found microscopic spheres in the soil, tiny metal fragments that seemed to contain elements not commonly found in natural meteorites. Some believe these could be remnants of something artificial, something built rather than formed in space. But without definitive proof, the theory remained just that, a theory. And yet, one detail stood out among all the reports, something that even skeptics couldn't ignore. If the Tunguska event had happened just a few hours later, the Earth's rotation would have placed the explosion over a major European city rather than the remote Siberian wilderness. Millions could have died in an instant. Was it just luck that the object exploded where it did? Or was it something else? Even today, as we scan the skies for potential threats, scientists warn that an event like Tunguska could happen again. Astronomers have identified thousands of near-Earth objects, some of which could strike the planet with devastating force. And the terrifying reality. We might not see it coming until it's too late. The question remains, was Tunguska a warning, a message, or was it simply an accident of cosmic proportions? Whatever the truth is, one thing is certain, we may not be as safe as we think. As the years passed, the mystery of the Tunguska event only grew darker, as if the land itself was holding onto a secret too dangerous to reveal. Scientists kept searching, expeditions continued to return with new fragments of the puzzle, but every explanation seemed to create more questions. And in the midst of all this uncertainty, strange things started happening to those who got too close to the truth. One of the most unsettling stories comes from a Soviet research team in the 1930s, who ventured deep into the blast zone to conduct tests. They had set up camp near the center of the devastation, carefully mapping out areas where the ground seemed most disturbed. But on the third night of their stay, something strange happened. One of the researchers, a young geologist named Anton, was found wandering in the forest at dawn, barefoot and muttering incoherently. When his team finally reached him, his skin was ice cold, his eyes wide with terror. He kept whispering about lights in the trees, voices in the wind, shadows that moved even when nothing was there. Anton was taken back to the city, but he was never the same again. He refused to talk about what he had seen, but in the weeks that followed, his health deteriorated. He grew weak, feverish, and by the time doctors were called in to examine him, his body was covered in strange burns, small, circular marks that no one could explain. Some said radiation exposure. Others whispered something far worse. Anton died not long after, and his final words were barely more than a whisper. It's still there. Watching. His case wasn't the only one. Other researchers reported feeling intense headaches, nausea, and an overwhelming sense of being watched while working in the Tunguska region. Compasses refused to work properly near the site, and radio signals often became distorted, as if something in the area was interfering with technology. Even the animals avoided the blast zone. Birds never nested there, and local hunters claimed that reindeer would go miles out of their way to avoid crossing through certain parts of the forest. Then there were the lights. Strange glowing orbs were seen hovering over the site on multiple occasions, even decades after the explosion. Soviet pilots flying over Tunguska in the 1960s reported seeing flashes of blue and white light dancing just above the treetops. Others claimed their instruments would suddenly fail as they approached the area, as if an invisible force was tampering with their controls. With each new development, the theories grew wilder. Some believed that a highly advanced but unknown natural phenomenon had occurred, a release of energy so powerful that it left behind scars in the fabric of reality itself. Others were convinced that whatever had caused the explosion had never actually left, that something remained in the ruins, hidden beneath the earth or watching from the skies, waiting for the right moment to return. And then, in the late 1970s, something even more bizarre happened. A secret Soviet project, later declassified, revealed that a team of researchers had been studying the electromagnetic anomalies in the Tunguska region. They had set up special recording devices in an attempt to capture the strange signals that were sometimes reported coming from the site. One night, the equipment picked up something unexpected, an odd rhythmic signal pulsing at regular intervals. At first, they assumed it was interference, perhaps from a satellite or radio station. But as they analyzed the data, they realized the signal wasn't coming from anywhere else on Earth. It was coming from deep within the Tunguska site itself. The researchers were ordered to continue their work, but soon after, the project was suddenly shut down. The records were sealed, and those involved were reassigned to different locations. No official explanation was given, but whispers spread among those who had seen the data. Some believed they had detected remnants of an alien signal, an echo of whatever had fallen from the sky in 1908. Others thought it was something even more terrifying, a signal that wasn't fading but growing stronger. Could it be that Tunguska wasn't just an impact site, but something more? A warning, a doorway, or even worse, a trap? Even now, with all our technology and research, the truth about the Tunguska event remains elusive. Scientists continued to monitor the area, looking for any signs of activity, any clue that might finally explain what happened that fateful morning. But deep down, some fear that the real answer is one we're not ready to face. Because what if the Tunguska event wasn't just a random cosmic accident? What if it was something deliberate? And what if it's not over yet? For years, the Tunguska event remained an unsolved cosmic riddle, but the more people searched for answers, the stranger the story became. Scientists thought they were investigating the past, trying to piece together what had already happened. But what if Tunguska wasn't just a relic of history? What if it was something unfinished, something still in motion? In the late 1990s, a small team of researchers, equipped with modern technology, decided to revisit the site. Unlike the early expeditions which had relied on maps and compasses, they brought ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging, and electromagnetic sensors. Their goal was simple: to finally determine if there was anything beneath the blast zone that had gone undetected for nearly a century. They didn't expect to find much. Maybe remnants of vaporized minerals, maybe slight irregularities in the earth. What they found instead changed everything. Deep beneath the soil, almost 100 feet down, the radar picked up an anomaly. Something dense, metallic, and completely unnatural. At first, they thought it might be a buried meteorite, the missing piece that had eluded scientists for so long. But as they analyzed the data, they realized the object wasn't just a solid mass. It had structure, sharp edges, patterns that didn't belong to any natural rock formation. It was as if something had been placed there, hidden away beneath the Siberian wilderness for over a century. They sent a report to their superiors, requesting permission to excavate. But before they could even begin, something strange happened. Their instruments, which had been working perfectly, began to fail one by one. Batteries drained within minutes. Hard drives wiped themselves clean. The temperature in their camp dropped suddenly, even though the weather had been stable all week. And then came the sounds. Late at night, when the team should have been alone in the frozen wilderness, they started hearing something moving in the distance. At first, it was just faint rustling, like the wind moving through the broken trees. But then it became something else. Whispering. Voices that seemed to come from nowhere. One researcher claimed he heard his own name being spoken, though no one else was awake at the time. Another woke up gasping for air, as if something had been pressing down on his chest while he slept. The next morning they made a decision: pack up, leave the site, and report their findings from a safe distance. But as they prepared to leave, they noticed something chilling. Their camp had shifted. Equipment they had left in one place had moved during the night. Footsteps, far too many for their small team, surrounded their tents in the snow. And most disturbingly, one of their cameras, which had been left running overnight, had captured something. The footage was grainy, distorted, almost useless. But for a split second just before the camera cut out, something could be seen in the trees. Figure. Not quite human. Not quite anything they could recognize. When they returned to the city, they expected excitement, funding, more support for their research. Instead, they were met with silence. Their report was ignored. Their findings were dismissed. One of them, an expert in geological anomalies, was suddenly reassigned to an unrelated project thousands of miles away. It was as if someone, somewhere, wanted the investigation to stop. And then, a few months later, the lead researcher disappeared. No warning. No note. His apartment was untouched, as if he had stepped out for a moment and never returned. His colleagues searched, but no answers came. Some believed he had simply left the country, afraid of what they had uncovered. Others weren't so sure. But here's the part that still haunts those who were involved. Just days before he vanished, he had sent an email to a trusted friend. It contained only one sentence. "It's awake." What had he seen? What had he discovered in the depths of the Tunguska zone? Was the explosion in 1908 just the beginning of something far greater? And if so, what happens next? The email, those two words, "It's awake," was the last trace of the missing researcher. His colleagues didn't know what to make of it. Was it a warning? A discovery? Or the ramblings of a man who had seen something he wasn't meant to? No one could say for sure. But those who had been on that final expedition to Tunguska couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. It was as if, after a century of silence, the land itself had stirred. In the weeks that followed his disappearance, strange reports surfaced. Pilots flying over the region reported sudden turbulence where the air had once been calm. A group of hikers, unaware of the site's dark history, went missing for several days, only to reappear at a village hundreds of miles away, disoriented, dehydrated, and unable to explain how they had traveled such a great distance. They only remembered one thing: a bright light in the sky, a deep humming sound that vibrated through the trees, and the feeling that something had been watching them. Satellite images of the Tunguska blast zone revealed another chilling detail: subtle but undeniable shifts in the landscape. Some trees that had stood untouched for decades had suddenly collapsed in perfect lines, mirroring the destruction from 1908. Even stranger, a handful of scientists reviewing historical records noticed an odd pattern. Every few decades, subtle anomalies occurred in the region. Small tremors, bursts of radiation, odd magnetic pulses. It was as if something beneath the earth was pulsing, stirring. One researcher, obsessed with finding the truth, managed to retrieve a fragment of the lost expedition's data. Most of the recordings had been corrupted, as if deliberately erased, but one audio file remained. It was faint, distorted, almost lost beneath static. But when enhanced, a sound became clear, a deep, rhythmic pulse, not unlike a heartbeat. It was steady, deliberate, alive. Some believed it was just interference, a strange coincidence, nothing more. But others knew better. Something had survived. Something was still there, beneath the frozen earth, waiting. And whatever the researchers had uncovered, whatever had cost them their careers, their sanity, and in at least one case, their life, had only been the beginning. Then, another disappearance. This time, it wasn't a researcher but an investigator. A journalist who had been looking into the sealed Soviet files on Tunguska. He had been close to uncovering something. A connection between the event and long-classified military experiments. The night before he was scheduled to release his findings, he vanished. His apartment was left untouched. His computer wiped clean. But he had been careful. A few days before he disappeared, he had sent a single document to a trusted friend. A document filled with calculations, strange coordinates, and one final message. Whatever happened in 1908, it's not over. The countdown has already begun. A countdown to what? Another explosion. Another event. Or had something been slowly waking up all these years, waiting for the moment to reveal itself? And if that moment was coming soon, would we be ready? Or was it already too late? The countdown. Those final words haunted the few who knew about them. If the Tunguska event wasn't just an accident, if it was something more, then what was it leading to? And more importantly, when? One last team, a mix of independent researchers and former intelligence agents, decided to go back. This time they didn't just bring scientific instruments. They brought everything: thermal scanners, radiation detectors, underground imaging equipment. And unlike before, they weren't just looking for evidence. They were looking for answers. As they set up camp near the epicenter, the strange disturbances began almost immediately. Static interference scrambled their communications. GPS devices failed within minutes. The temperature dropped unnaturally fast as night fell, making the air thick with an uneasy silence. But what truly shook them wasn't what they saw, it was what they felt. There was something beneath them. Something shifting, pulsing. The team drilled into the frozen earth, careful not to disturb whatever lay below. At first, they only found shattered rock, layers of permafrost. But then, just past the 100-foot mark, the drill hit something else. Not stone. Not ice. Metal. It was smooth, curved, unlike anything found naturally underground. They cleared away more of the earth, revealing a structure. Something massive, buried for over a century. And as they exposed more of it, their instruments flared to life. The deep, rhythmic pulse they had heard in the corrupted audio recordings was no longer faint. It was clear, steady. Wait. One of the researchers, barely able to believe what he was seeing, ran his hand over the strange metal surface. The moment his fingers touched it, every device in the camp shut down. Lights flickered out. Cameras froze. For a brief moment, the only sound was the wind howling through the trees. Then the ground beneath them moved. It wasn't an earthquake. It wasn't a landslide. It was something else, something deliberate. The structure they had uncovered wasn't just an object. It was alive. Or at least something inside it was. Before they could react, the sky above them split open with a flash of blinding light. Not fire. Not an explosion. A beam of pure energy shot down, illuminating the buried structure as if activating something long dormant. The researchers stumbled back, shielding their eyes. And then silence. When they looked again, the metal structure had changed. Faint, glowing patterns now ran across its surface, shifting, forming symbols no one could understand. It wasn't a meteorite. It wasn't debris from space. It was a machine. And it had been waiting. Then the realization hit. The Tunguska Event had never been an accident. It wasn't just an explosion. It was an impact. Controlled event. Something had come down that day in 1908, not to destroy, but to land. To hide. Wait. And now, after more than a century, it was ready. The team scrambled to gather their data, to document what they had found. But before they could, the sky flashed again. This time not above them but on the horizon. Lights. Dozens of them. Moving, descending. The countdown had ended. And whatever was coming next had already begun. The team stood frozen, staring at the lights descending on the horizon. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't just a random phenomenon. Something was approaching. Something had been waiting for this exact moment. The air felt heavy, charged with an energy none of them could explain. It was like standing at the edge of a storm, knowing the worst was still to come. One of the researchers grabbed a satellite phone, desperately trying to call for help, but it was useless. Every piece of technology they had brought was dead. Cameras, sensors, even watches, nothing worked anymore. Time itself felt stretched, each second dragging as they watched the horizon glow brighter. Then the sound returned. That same deep, rhythmic pulse they had recorded before. But now it was louder, more defined, as if something massive had awakened beneath them. The machine, if that's what it was responding. Not just to their presence, but to whatever was coming. The ground trembled, not violently, but with purpose, like something was shifting deep within the earth. The glowing symbols on the metallic surface flickered, rearranging in patterns no one could recognize. One of the scientists, his voice barely above a whisper, muttered a terrifying realization. It's a signal. It wasn't just some buried structure. It was a beacon. And now, after more than a century of waiting, it had finally sent out its call. Panic set in. Some wanted to flee, to put as much distance between themselves and this place as possible. Others argued they needed to stay, to document what was happening, to understand. But before any decision could be made, the air around them changed. A sound unlike anything they had ever heard filled the night. Not mechanical, not human. It was layered, resonant, vibrating through the ground, through their bodies. It wasn't just noise. It was communication. And then, without warning, the lights on the horizon stopped moving. For the first time, the distant glow held still, hanging in the sky like frozen embers. The ground beneath them ceased its tremors. Even the pulse, the deep, rhythmic signal, faded into silence. The world held its breath. Then a single flash. Not an explosion, not an attack, just an instant of pure, blinding light. And just as quickly as it had come, it was gone. The night was still again. The lights had vanished. The machine beneath the earth went dark, its symbols fading back into cold metal. It was over. Or at least it seemed to be. The team stood in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. What had they witnessed? Failed activation. Test. A warning. Had something been stopped before it could begin? Or was this just another stage in a much larger process? With no clear answers, they did the only thing they could: they left. Whatever had happened that night, it was beyond them, beyond science, beyond human understanding. The only thing they knew for certain was that the Tunguska event had not been an accident. It had been an arrival. And whatever had arrived, it was still out there. In the weeks that followed, the team tried to report their findings, but they were met with silence. Government officials dismissed their claims. The footage they had managed to capture, distorted, fragmented, was confiscated. Files disappeared. The researchers were reassigned, some to projects that had nothing to do with their expertise. Others simply walked away, unwilling to speak of what they had seen. And yet, the world remained unchanged. No further signs. No more lights. No more signals. As if whatever had stirred that night had gone back to sleep. But had it? Somewhere deep in Siberia, beneath layers of earth and ice, something remained. Something waiting. Perhaps for another 100 years. Perhaps for something else entirely. And the real question, the one no one dared to ask, wasn't what had woken up that night. It was whether it would wake up again,